The streets are empty, dust hanging heavy in the air, veiling the town in a silence that feels unnatural, as if the world itself is holding its breath. I scan the narrow alleyways, my footsteps echoing against the crumbling stone walls, the letter clutched tightly in my hand. It's creased from days of travel, its edges worn and faded, but its words are etched into my mind as if I'd written them myself. I can still hear his voice. Matthias, my friend, my comrade, speaking to me in the dying light of his last night. His words had been weak, broken, slipping from his lips like fragments of glass, cutting as they left. "Promise me, Leo," he'd whispered, his eyes clouded, the light in them flickering like the faintest of flames. "Promise you'll get this letter to her. To Sofia." I had nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight with grief, and he'd held on to that promise like it was the last solid thing in his world. The war took Matthias, as it's taken so many, leaving behind only memories and a letter I now carry as a sacred vow. I was assigned another mission, orders as cold as the ground we march on, but I knew I couldn't leave without keeping my promise. And so, I found myself here in this occupied town, alone and vulnerable, bound to the only task that feels as important as the war itself. It doesn't take me long to find her home, a small, humble place near the edge of town. There's a single window covered by tattered curtains, and a chipped, rusted mailbox hangs crooked beside the door. I hesitate, feeling the weight of Matthias's words, the enormity of what I'm about to do. My hand hovers over the door, but before I can knock, it opens a crack, and a woman's face appears, cautious, guarded. She's younger than I expected, with tired eyes that have seen far too much. Her gaze is sharp, assessing me in an instant, but there's a softness around her mouth, a gentleness that contrasts with the wariness in her expression. I clear my throat, suddenly uncertain, feeling the weight of Matthias's memory pressing down on me. "Sofia?" I ask, my voice coming out rougher than I'd intended. Her eyes narrow, but she nods, her gaze never leaving mine. "Who are you?" she asks, her voice steady but cautious, a tone that's become second nature for those who live in constant fear. A small child stands just behind her, peeking out from the folds of her skirt. A boy, barely more than 3 or 4, his wide eyes fixed on me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. I swallow, holding up the letter, the familiar worn paper suddenly feeling like a lifeline between us. "My name's Leo," I say, my voice softer now. I was a friend of Matthias. We served together. He asked me to bring you this." The guarded look in her eyes shifts, and for a moment she seems to lose herself, her gaze falling to the letter. Her hand trembles slightly as she reaches for it, her fingers brushing mine, and I feel the faintest shiver run through me. She takes it, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words come. Instead, she simply stares down at the letter, her expression a fragile mix of relief and pain, a silent thank you in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispers finally, her voice breaking. She glances down at her son, placing a gentle hand on his head, and then looks back up at me. "Please, would you like to come inside?" I hesitate, feeling the weight of Matthias's memory and the promise I made to him. But the look in her eyes, the quiet unspoken plea, is something I can't ignore. I nod, stepping over the threshold into the small, dimly lit room that feels like it belongs to another world, one untouched by the brutality beyond its walls. Inside, the space is simple but warm, a small table with a worn tablecloth, a pair of chairs, a few carefully arranged toys scattered across the floor. I take a seat, glancing around, feeling a strange sense of comfort amidst the humble surroundings. The boy watches me, his gaze solemn, and I offer him a small smile, feeling a pang in my chest as I realize how closely he resembles Matthias. The same intense, serious eyes, the same determined set to his jaw. Sofia sits across from me, the letter still in her hands, as if she's afraid to open it, afraid to see the final words Matthias left behind. Finally, after a moment, she unfolds it, her fingers trembling, and begins to read. Her eyes scan the words, and I can see the pain etched across her face, each line a fresh wound, each word a reminder of the life she's lost. When she finishes, she folds the letter carefully, placing it on the table as if it's the most precious thing in the world. She doesn't look at me, her gaze fixed on the letter, her voice barely more than a whisper. He spoke of you, Leo. He said you were like a brother to him." I nod, the memories of Matthias flooding back, a wave of laughter, of late-night conversations, of quiet moments shared in the silence of the battlefield. "He was like a brother to me too," I say, my voice thick with grief. "He fought with everything he had, right up until the end." Sofia closes her eyes, taking a deep breath, and when she opens them again, there's a new resolve there, a strength that hadn't been there before. "Thank you," she says quietly, "for being there with him, for bringing me this. It means more than you can know." A silence settles between us, heavy and raw, and I feel the urge to say something, anything to ease the weight of it. But before I can speak, the distant rumble of tanks echoes from beyond the town, a reminder of the danger that lurks outside, of the war that waits just beyond the fragile safety of this house. She glances toward the window, her face tight with worry, her hand reaching instinctively for her son. "They've been moving closer each day," she murmurs, her voice tense. "The enemy troops. I don't know how long we'll be safe here." A wave of protectiveness washes over me, fierce and unexpected, as I watch her, this woman who's lost so much yet continues to stand, who now faces the threat of losing everything. I made a promise to Matthias, but it doesn't feel fulfilled yet. Leaving her here, alone with her son, vulnerable to the merciless advance of enemy soldiers, it's unthinkable. "I'll stay," I say, the decision solidifying in my mind as the words leave my mouth. "At least until things settle. I can help keep watch, make sure you're safe." She looks at me, surprise flickering across her face, but there's something else too, a quiet gratitude, a faint glimmer of relief. "You don't have to do that," she says, though her voice is soft, the words lacking conviction. "I know," I reply, my gaze steady, "but I want to. For Matthias." A faint smile tugs at her lips, a mixture of sadness and gratitude, and she nods, accepting my offer with a quiet grace. The child watches us, his small face solemn, and I feel a pang in my chest, a fierce, unbreakable resolve taking hold. Matthias's son. I'll keep him safe, as I promised. I'll keep them both safe. The rumble of tanks fades into the distance, but the tension remains, a silent promise of what's to come. For the next few hours, I keep watch from the small window, my gaze scanning the streets, alert for any sign of danger. Sofia prepares a simple meal, her movements quiet and efficient, and we eat together, our conversation sparse but comfortable, a fragile sense of peace settling over us. That night, as they sleep in the small bedroom, I sit by the door, rifle in hand, my senses sharp, every instinct tuned to the slightest sound. The darkness stretches, deep and unyielding, but I remain vigilant, my mind clear, my heart anchored by the promise I made. This family, Matthias's family, will not face this war alone. Not while I'm here. And as I sit in the silence, the faint flickering light from the lantern casting shadows across the room, I make a silent vow, a promise to Matthias, to Sofia, to the boy who bears his father's name. I will keep them safe, no matter what. The next morning dawns gray and cold, casting long shadows across the quiet town. I take a deep breath as I step outside, letting the chill air wake me up, sharpen my senses. The streets are still, haunted by the faint echoes of distant artillery fire. I scan the area, noting the possible escape routes, the alleyways that wind through town like veins. The sense of responsibility I feel for Sofia and her son presses on me heavily, but I welcome it. It's the first time since Matthias's death that I've felt a purpose beyond survival. Inside, Sofia is already up, moving quietly around the small kitchen. Her son, little Emil, sits at the table, his hands clumsily holding a wooden spoon as he eats his breakfast. I catch his eye, and he gives me a shy smile, his curiosity cautious but unmistakable. I return it, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. Matthias's face flashes through my mind, those same curious eyes, the same quiet determination I see in his son. It feels as if I've found a piece of my friend that I can protect, something to hold on to in a world that feels like it's slipping away. "Thank you for staying," Sofia says softly, glancing at me over her shoulder as she moves to pour a small cup of tea. "I know you have your own duties, your own fight, but it means more than I can say." I nod, struggling to find words to express the mix of determination and gratitude I feel. "I promised Matthias I'd keep you safe," I say simply. "I'll see it through, no matter what." A silence falls between us, but it's comfortable, the kind of silence that feels like understanding. We don't need many words. The promise I made to Matthias speaks for itself. As I scan the room, my gaze falls on a small bundle by the door. A few belongings, a blanket, a tin of food. I realize she's prepared to leave at a moment's notice, to abandon the home where she and Matthias had dreamed of a future together. I feel a surge of anger at the thought of everything they've lost, everything they continue to lose, and I resolve to protect what little she has left. By midday, we hear the first signs of enemy movement, a faint rumble of vehicles echoing down the narrow streets, the occasional shout of orders. I tense, watching from the window as soldiers march past, their expressions grim, their eyes scanning the buildings with a practiced, unforgiving gaze. The tension in the town is palpable, thickening with each passing hour. Sofia and I take turns keeping watch, signaling to each other with a quiet nod when we see a patrol pass, making sure to keep little Emil out of sight. It's strange, the way we fall into this rhythm so naturally, as if we've known each other longer than a single night. There's a strength in her that surprises me, a resilience that mirrors the one Matthias had, a determination that makes me more resolute than ever to protect her. When the streets fall silent again, Sofia finally turns to me, her eyes hard with a quiet, unyielding determination. "If they come," she says, her voice steady, "we won't be able to stop them. I know that, but I want you to promise me something." I nod, holding her gaze, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. "Anything. If it comes to it, if they break in and we're out of time, take Emil and run," she says, her voice barely more than a whisper, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Take him somewhere safe. Even if you can't get far, just don't let him see this." I feel a tightness in my chest, the thought of leaving her here, of taking her son and abandoning her to whatever fate awaits. But I see the fierce love in her eyes, the resolve that tells me she would rather face it alone than let her son suffer. I reach out, placing a hand on her shoulder, feeling the weight of my promise to her and Matthias settle deep within me. "I swear to you, Sofia," I say, my voice steady. I won't let anything happen to him. She nods, her shoulders relaxing ever so slightly, and we share a moment of quiet understanding, a bond forged in grief, in loss, in the unbreakable promise we both know I will keep. That night, I sit by the door, rifle in hand, my senses sharp, every nerve on edge. I hear the distant rumble of tanks, the sound of soldiers' boots echoing down the streets, and I brace myself, my mind racing with plans, escape routes, contingencies. My thoughts are interrupted by a soft voice. Leo! I look up to see little Emile, standing in the doorway, his eyes wide and curious. He holds a small, battered teddy bear in his arms, the worn fabric a testament to the love and comfort it's brought him in a world of fear. I give him a small smile, motioning for him to come closer. He approaches, his gaze lingering on the rifle in my hands. Are you here to keep Mama safe? He asks, his voice a quiet whisper. I nod, feeling the weight of his trust settle over me like a blanket. Yes, I say softly. I'm here to keep both of you safe. I promised your papa I would. Emile's eyes brighten at the mention of his father, and he sits beside me, clutching his bear tightly. Mama says Papa was very brave, he says, his voice filled with quiet pride. She says he was the bravest man in the whole world. He was, I reply, my voice thick with emotion. He was brave, and he loved you and your mama more than anything. We sit in silence, the distant sounds of the advancing army a reminder of the danger that lurks just beyond the walls. But as I look at Emile, his small face serious and thoughtful, I feel a renewed strength, a sense of purpose that anchors me against the fear. This boy, this family, they are worth every risk, every sacrifice. For them, I would stand against the world. Sofia appears in the doorway, her expression soft as she watches us. She kneels down, reaching out to take Emile's hand, and he looks up at her with a trust that breaks my heart. It's time for bed, Emile, she says gently, her voice steady, though I can see the worry in her eyes. He nods, giving me a small, solemn smile before following her into the small bedroom. As they disappear behind the door, I feel a surge of resolve, a promise to myself as much as to them. I will see this through, no matter what. The hours pass in tense silence, each sound outside sending a fresh jolt of adrenaline through me. But just before dawn, a sharp knock echoes through the house, shattering the quiet. I freeze, my heart pounding as I grip the rifle, my mind racing. The knock comes again, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of a voice, a soldier's voice, rough and impatient. I hear Sofia's soft footsteps as she steps out of the bedroom, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She glances at me, her expression filled with silent questions, but I shake my head, motioning for her to stay back. The soldier knocks again, the force rattling the door in its frame. Open up! He barks, his tone leaving no room for defiance. We know someone's in there. I take a deep breath, the weight of Matthias's promise settling over me, grounding me. Slowly, I step toward the door, my fingers tightening around the rifle, every nerve in my body taut with readiness. Stay with Emile, I murmur to Sofia, my voice barely more than a whisper. No matter what, stay with him. She nods, her face filled with fear, but also with a fierce, quiet strength. She pulls back, moving to stand in front of the bedroom door, her gaze locked on mine, and I know she understands. She knows the risk, the danger, but she trusts me, and that trust is all I need. I open the door, stepping out into the cold dawn air, my heart pounding, every sense alive. The soldier's gaze sharpens as he sees me, his hand twitching toward his weapon. But I stand firm, my voice steady as I speak, a calmness in my tone that surprises even me. "What do you want?" I ask, my gaze unflinching. The soldier studies me, suspicion flickering in his eyes. But as I stand there, my rifle at my side, my expression calm, he hesitates, something in my stance giving him pause. For now he's unsure, and it's a small victory. One I'll use to buy them as much time as I can. The soldier's gaze flickers over me, his expression hardening as he assesses the situation, his eyes sharp with suspicion. He stands only a few paces away, hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. The silence stretches, thick and tense, each second tightening the knot in my stomach. "There are rumors," he says, his voice a low growl, "that someone is harboring deserters in this part of town. Orders are to search every home." His gaze shifts, his eyes narrowing. "If you're hiding anyone, now's your chance to make it easy." I meet his gaze, feeling the weight of his words settle heavily over me. Sofia and Emil are just a few feet behind me, hidden by the thin walls of the small house, the fragile safety I've tried so hard to protect now resting on a knife's edge. Every instinct in me wants to defy him, to shove him back and lock the door, but I know that the slightest misstep could bring this all crashing down. I steady my breath, gripping the rifle a bit tighter, though I make sure it's angled just enough to avoid drawing his attention. "No one's here but me," I say, keeping my voice calm, steady. "I was passing through, just taking shelter for a night." He studies me, his eyes narrowing, and I hold his gaze, keeping my expression neutral, my body relaxed despite the tension coiling in my gut. He lets the silence stretch, as if daring me to make a move, but when I remain still, he grunts, giving a faint nod. "Fine, but we'll be checking the area." He gestures sharply to the men behind him, signaling them to disperse and move through the street. "If we find anything..." He leaves the threat hanging in the air, his expression cold, but I nod, saying nothing, watching as he turns and steps back, disappearing around the corner with a grim final glance. The door creaks as I close it, and I press my back against it, releasing a long, shaky breath. My heart races, the tension slowly ebbing from my body, but the danger is far from over. I step away from the door and turn to see Sofia watching me, her face pale, her hands clutching the edges of her skirt, her eyes wide with fear. She looks at me, her expression a mixture of gratitude and worry. "Thank you," she whispers, her voice barely audible, as if afraid of breaking the silence that hangs between us. She glances toward the small bedroom where Emil still sleeps, blissfully unaware of the close call that just brushed past us. I nod, my gaze softening. "We'll have to be even more careful now," I say quietly. "They're searching. It won't be long before they double back." Sofia's face tightens, her eyes flickering with determination. "Then we need a plan. Staying here, it's not safe anymore." I feel a weight settle over me, the full reality of our situation pressing down with a crushing certainty. She's right. We can't stay. Not now, not with the soldiers making their rounds, not with Muller likely setting his sights on each home one by one. If we stay, it's only a matter of time before they find us. "Pack what you need," I say, my voice quiet but firm. "Only the essentials. We'll leave under cover of night, head toward the woods outside of town. I know a few safe spots, places the soldiers won't think to check." She nods, moving quickly, her movements brisk and purposeful as she gathers what little they own. Watching her, I feel a surge of respect, admiration. She doesn't panic, doesn't hesitate, even as she prepares to leave behind everything familiar. The strength I saw in Matthias lives on in her, a quiet resilience that cuts through the fear and keeps her moving forward. As night falls, I lead them out into the silent streets, guiding them through back alleys and side roads, staying hidden in the shadows, keeping as far from the soldiers' patrols as possible. Emil clings to Sofia, his small hand clutching hers, his eyes wide with curiosity but free of fear. He trusts her completely, and that trust is a lifeline for both of us, a reminder of why we're here, of the promise I made. We slip out of town just as the last light fades, the darkened woods rising ahead of us like a silent, watchful guardian. The trees close around us, their branches arching overhead, casting deep shadows that shroud us from sight. The air is cold, heavy with the scent of earth and pine, and for a brief moment, the tension eases, replaced by the stillness of the forest, a peace that feels almost fragile. Sofia pauses, pulling Emil close, glancing back at the town. Her expression is tight, a mixture of relief and sadness, and I can see the conflict in her eyes. This town, this life, it's all she's ever known, the last piece of a world that's been ripped away. But she doesn't falter, her gaze steady as she faces forward, her hand clutching Emil's as if he's the only anchor she needs. "We'll be safer here," I say, breaking the silence, my voice low. "There's a small cabin a little further up. It's not much, but it'll give us cover." She nods, and we continue our journey, moving through the dense underbrush, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. After a while, the faint outline of the cabin appears through the trees, a small structure barely visible in the darkness, hidden among the towering pines. It's little more than a shack, its walls weathered, its roof patched, but its shelter, a safe place to hide. Inside, Sofia settles Emil down, wrapping him in a blanket, her gentle hands soothing him as he drifts off to sleep. The fire crackles softly in the small hearth, casting a warm glow that pushes back the darkness, filling the cabin with a fragile warmth. I sit by the door, my rifle within reach, my eyes scanning the shadows outside, every sense alert. Sofia joins me, sitting in silence, her gaze focused on the fire, her face lined with exhaustion. "How long do you think we'll have to stay here?" she asks softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Until we're sure they've given up the search," I reply, though the truth is, I don't know how long we can hold out here. The soldiers are relentless, and Muller, if he suspects even a hint of resistance, he won't stop until he finds us. But I don't voice these fears. She doesn't need to carry them on top of everything else. Sofia nods, her eyes distant, her face pale in the firelight. After a moment, she looks at me, her expression softening. "You could have left us," she murmurs, her voice barely audible. "You had no obligation. No one would have blamed you." I meet her gaze, feeling the weight of Matthias's memory between us, a silent promise that binds us together. "Matthias was more than a friend," I say, my voice steady. "He trusted me with his last words, his last hope. I won't break that trust. Not for anything." A faint smile touches her lips, a flicker of warmth breaking through the sadness in her eyes. "He always said you were the most loyal friend he'd ever known, that you'd never let anyone down." She looks away, her fingers brushing over Emil's hair. "I think he knew, somehow, that you'd be here for us." The silence stretches, filled with the crackling of the fire, the steady rhythm of Emil's breathing, and in that quiet, I feel the enormity of what I've taken on, the life that rests in my hands, the family I've vowed to protect. I don't know if I can truly keep them safe. The danger is real, and it's closing in, but the resolve I feel is unwavering, a steady flame that refuses to die. We sit there, watching the fire burn low, the shadows stretching across the walls, and I feel the strength of her presence beside me, a quiet courage that bolsters my own. We are here, in this small, fragile place, holding on to hope, holding on to each other in a world that seems determined to tear us apart. As the first light of dawn filters through the trees, a faint cold glow that touches the edges of the forest, I feel a surge of resolve, a fierce, unbreakable promise to see this through, to protect this family at any cost. For Matthias, for Sofia, for the boy who sleeps peacefully in his mother's arms. For them, I will stand against whatever comes. And I will not fail. The days in the forest settle into a tense rhythm, each one bringing us closer to safety. Yet the fear of discovery never loosens its grip. Sofia and I keep watch in turns, her gaze sharp as she scans the shadows around the cabin, always alert. Every rustle, every bird call feels like it could signal the end of our fragile peace. Emile, thankfully, adjusts to the change better than I'd hoped. He spends his days near the cabin, drawing lines in the dirt with a stick, finding shapes in the clouds, the simple pleasures of a child sheltered from the gravity of our situation. I find myself watching him often, his laughter a soft, bright note in the quiet of the forest, a reminder of the life Matthias had hoped to give him. It's evening when I hear a faint crackle in the distance, a sound that's both familiar and out of place. Sofia tenses beside me, her gaze snapping to the window, her face pale. I signal for her to stay quiet, pressing my ear to the wall, straining to catch the sound. There it is again, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps moving through the underbrush. I feel the rush of adrenaline surge through me, every muscle tensing as I gesture for Sofia to keep Emile quiet. I step outside as silently as I can, rifle at the ready, my gaze sweeping the trees. The forest is thick, the trees casting long shadows in the fading light, but I see movement, a figure slipping through the trees, barely visible. There's only one of them, moving carefully, as if searching for something specific. My pulse pounds, and I wonder if this is just a scout, or if there are more soldiers lying in wait. Keeping low, I edge forward, positioning myself between the cabin and the intruder. The figure is close enough now that I can see he's armed, his stance cautious but certain, as though he's been here before. I watch, waiting, my mind racing with possibilities. He doesn't look like one of Muller's men. His uniform is different, his pace less urgent, more exploratory. Whoever he is, he's not with our regular patrols. The intruder takes another step forward, his gaze scanning the ground, and for a split second, he's close enough that I can see his face. He's young, no more than 20, his expression hard, his eyes focused. I tighten my grip on the rifle, every instinct screaming at me to defend the family behind me. But something about the look on his face gives me pause, a flicker of doubt, a hesitation that feels out of place. "Stop," I say quietly, stepping into view, my rifle raised, hands where I can see them. The young man freezes, his eyes widening as he spots me. He lifts his hands slowly, his gaze flicking over my uniform, the wary calculation in his eyes softening into something like understanding. "You're not one of them," he says, his voice low, careful. "Are you?" I keep the rifle steady, assessing him. "And who are you?" I ask, not dropping my guard. "What are you doing out here?" He glances around, as if to ensure we're alone, before meeting my gaze. Well, let's just say I'm not exactly on their side either," he mutters, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "I've been helping people, moving them out of the occupied zones, keeping them safe." Suspicion flickers through me, but I see no deceit in his face, no sign of malice. He looks like he's seen more than his years should allow, a haunted look in his eyes that mirrors what I see in my own reflection. His expression shifts as he studies me, a glimmer of recognition lighting his gaze. "You're the one they're looking for, aren't you?" he says, his voice softening. "The deserter. With the family." I feel the muscles in my shoulders tighten, the weight of my promise to Matthias pressing down on me. "You know too much," I say quietly, my grip firm. "If you're lying." "I'm not," he replies quickly, his voice earnest. "Look, I don't have much time. They're combing the woods, patrolling the towns, looking for anyone helping the resistance. But I can get you and the family out, if you trust me." I hesitate, my gaze shifting back toward the cabin, where Sofia and Emil wait in the silence. The thought of putting them in more danger, of trusting a stranger, is terrifying. But the alternative, to stay here, vulnerable to the patrols closing in, is even worse. "What's your plan?" I ask, keeping my tone steady. He glances around, his eyes alert, calculating. "There's a route through the mountains. It's dangerous, but the soldiers don't know about it. If we leave tonight, I can take you to a safe house in the valley. From there, you'll have a chance." I weigh his words, searching his face for any hint of betrayal, any sign that this is a trap. But all I see is the same determination that drives me, the same resolve that's kept me going since Matthias's last words. He looks like a man who's seen enough of the war to know where his loyalties lie, and for the first time in days, a spark of hope flickers in my chest. I nod, lowering my rifle, though I keep it close. "All right," I say, my voice firm. "But if this is a trick?" He shakes his head, his expression serious. "It's not. I want to help." I call softly for Sofia, watching as she steps out of the cabin, her face filled with uncertainty, her hand on Emil's shoulder. She looks at the young man, her gaze sharp, assessing, but she doesn't question my decision. She trusts me, even now, even with everything at stake. We gather what little we have, the night cloaking us in its shadow as we follow the young man through the forest, his steps quick but careful, guiding us along narrow trails that weave through the dense underbrush. The mountains loom ahead, their peaks dark against the star-strewn sky, a silent promise of safety waiting just beyond reach. As we walk, Sofia reaches for my hand, her grip firm, steady, a quiet reassurance that strengthens my resolve. Emil clings to her other hand, his gaze wide with awe as he glances up at the mountains, the faint outline of their towering cliffs filling him with a sense of wonder that only a child could feel in the midst of such danger. The young man, our guide, leads us through the night, his movements practiced, familiar with every twist and turn. He shares little about himself, but his knowledge of the land, the paths hidden from the soldiers' eyes, speaks volumes. He is one of us, a man who has seen enough to know where his heart belongs. As dawn breaks, we reach the edge of the valley, the safe house just a short distance away. Relief floods me as I take in the modest structure, its stone walls blending into the hillside, its windows dark, hidden beneath the shadow of the mountain. It's small, but it's shelter, a place to rest, to breathe, to plan our next steps. The young man pauses, turning to us, his expression both weary and resolute. "You'll be safe here for a few days," he says, his voice quiet. "After that, there's a path north through the valley. If you follow it, you'll reach the border." Sofia nods, her gaze filled with gratitude, though the words she speaks are barely a whisper. "Thank you," she murmurs, her voice thick with emotion, "for giving us a chance." He gives a small, solemn smile, glancing toward Emil with a softness in his eyes that catches me off guard. "Take care of each other," he says, his voice almost a murmur, before he turns and disappears into the forest, leaving us alone. Inside the safe house, we settle in, exhaustion washing over us as the reality of our escape sets in. I sit by the window, watching the horizon, my mind racing with thoughts of the journey that lies ahead. But for the first time, I feel a cautious optimism, a hope that perhaps we can make it through this, that Matthias's family, his son, will have a future beyond the reach of this war. Sofia joins me, her gaze distant as she looks out into the dawn, a faint smile on her lips. "We're going to make it, Leo," she says softly, her voice filled with a quiet confidence that steadies my heart. "I know it." I look at her, feeling the weight of my promise, the depth of our bond, and I nod, my voice a whisper. "For Matthias. For Emil. We'll make it." And as the first light of morning fills the valley, casting a gentle glow over the mountains, I feel the strength of that promise settle over me, a beacon that will guide us forward, no matter what lies ahead. The days in the safe house pass in tense quiet, each hour both a relief and a reminder of the dangers that still surround us. I keep watch from the small dirt-streaked window, my rifle always within reach, every sound outside sending a fresh wave of adrenaline through me. The valley is eerily still, the trees swaying in the wind, their shadows stretching across the mountainside like silent sentries. Sofia and Emil settle into a routine, each day marked by small moments of peace that I cling to like lifelines. Emil's laughter fills the room as he plays with a piece of string, fashioning it into different shapes. Sofia's gentle guidance steadying him as they sit together by the hearth. In these brief, fragile moments, I feel the presence of Matthias, the weight of his absence, both a pain and a quiet comfort. I'm here, fulfilling the promise I made to him, protecting the family he left behind. It's all I have now, and for them, I'll give everything. On the third night, Sofia approaches as I sit by the window, her steps soft but purposeful. She wraps a blanket around her shoulders, the firelight casting a warm glow over her face, softening the worry that's etched there like a permanent shadow. She sits beside me, her gaze drifting to the darkness outside, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asks, the vulnerability in her voice catching me off guard. She's been strong, unbreakable even, through every moment of our escape, and to see this flicker of doubt only deepens my resolve. I turn to her, my voice firm, filled with a conviction I don't entirely feel but know she needs to hear. "Yes, we will. The border isn't far now. Just a few more days." Her gaze holds mine, searching, as if she's looking for reassurance, for something solid to hold on to. "Thank you," she murmurs, her voice barely audible. "For staying. For keeping Emil safe. I don't think I could have done this alone." Her words settle over me like a balm, a reminder that the bond we share, forged in grief and loss, has become a lifeline. I place a hand on her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her presence, the strength that radiates from her even in her moments of doubt. "You're stronger than you know, Sofia," I say softly. "Matthias knew it, and so do I." She gives a faint smile, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, and we sit in silence, letting the quiet stretch between us, a fragile peace filling the space. Just as dawn begins to lighten the sky, I hear it, the low hum of engines, the faint rumble of tires crunching against gravel. My body goes rigid, my pulse quickening as I scan the valley, spotting the faint outline of a convoy moving through the trees, heading directly toward us. Panic floods me, but I force it down, turning to Sofia, my voice urgent but controlled. They've found us. We need to leave. Now. Sofia's face pales, but she doesn't hesitate, grabbing a small bundle of supplies, waking Emil with a soft, hurried whisper. Within moments, we're out the door, slipping into the cover of the forest, my hand on Emil's shoulder, guiding him as Sofia leads the way. The trees close around us, their branches casting shadows over the narrow path, our footsteps muffled by the damp ground. The soldiers' voices echo faintly behind us, the crunch of their boots on the gravel too close for comfort. I tighten my grip on Emil's shoulder, his small frame shivering with each sharp order, each barked command that carries through the trees. Sofia's gaze flicks back to me, her face taut with fear but focused, her pace steady as she moves quickly, efficiently. We reach a clearing, the forest stretching ahead of us like a labyrinth, and I glance around, searching for any sign of a place to hide, to regroup. My heart pounds as I catch sight of a narrow cave tucked into the hillside, its entrance hidden by a cluster of bushes. I motion for Sofia and Emil to follow, leading them toward the opening, crouching low as we slip inside, our breaths shallow, our movements careful. Inside, the darkness is thick, swallowing us whole, but it's safe, at least for the moment. I keep my rifle ready, my eyes fixed on the narrow entrance, listening to the soldiers' footsteps grow louder, the faint beams of their flashlights cutting through the trees just beyond the cave's mouth. The silence stretches, each second a heartbeat, each breath a prayer. Sofia holds Emil close, her hand over his mouth to keep him quiet, her other hand clutching his small fingers. I glance at them, the weight of my promise to Matthias pressing down on me, a fierce resolve surging through me. I won't let them be taken. Not now. Not ever. The footsteps pause just outside the cave, a flashlight beam sweeping over the entrance, the faintest hint of movement casting shadows across the walls. I hold my breath, my grip on the rifle tightening, every muscle poised to spring, to protect them with my last breath if I must. The soldier lingers, his figure a dark silhouette against the morning light filtering through the trees, his posture tense, as if sensing something just beyond his reach. And then, as if by some stroke of mercy, he turns, his footsteps retreating, his voice fading as he calls out to his comrades. The soldiers move away, their search continuing deeper into the forest, leaving us in the darkness, the silence heavy with relief. We wait until the sound of their footsteps fades entirely, until the forest is once again quiet, before we emerge, stepping carefully, keeping low, our breaths ragged but steady. The path ahead is clear, the forest stretching toward the mountains, and with a final glance at the direction the soldiers went, I lead us forward, keeping a brisk but cautious pace. As the afternoon sun breaks through the canopy, we reach a narrow path winding up the mountainside, the final stretch before the border. Relief floods me, the weight of our journey, of the danger, lifting as I take in the sight of the distant peaks, the promise of safety just beyond. Sofia's eyes meet mine, a mixture of exhaustion and hope shining there, and she gives a small nod, her lips curving into a faint, triumphant smile. Emil, too, seems to sense the change, his gaze brightening as he looks up at me, a silent question in his eyes. "Are we safe now?" he whispers, his voice barely more than a breath. I crouch beside him, my hand resting on his shoulder, and I nod, my voice soft but firm. "Yes, Emil. We're almost there. Just a little farther." We climb the path, our steps slow but steady, each step bringing us closer to freedom, to the life Matthias would have wanted for them. The sun begins to set, casting a warm glow over the mountains, the horizon stretching out before us, open and endless. As we crest the final ridge, the border checkpoint appears, its gates open, the faint hum of voices and movement a welcome sound. I feel a surge of emotion, a sense of peace I haven't known in months, and as I turn to Sofia, I see the same relief, the same quiet joy reflected in her eyes. We step forward together, crossing the threshold, the weight of the war, the loss, the grief left behind us. I glance back one last time, the mountains standing tall against the fading light, a silent witness to the journey that brought us here, to the promise that guided every step. Sofia takes my hand, her grip firm, and Emil's small fingers curl around mine, a gesture of trust, of gratitude, of a future that feels almost within reach. And as we step into the light, the promise I made to Matthias fills me with a quiet strength, a resolve that I will carry with me, always. For him, for Sofia, for Emil. We are free.